You're listening to the Packernet Podcast Network.
You ever hear of test driving a phone network? Well, US Cellular is letting you test drive their nationwide 5G for free. Try out US Cellular wherever you have spotty service. Your commute to work, that one spot in your house where your service dips. It's as easy as doing a little beep boop pop boop pop with your phone. That's the buttons. That's the noise they make. Anyways, test drive US Cellular's nationwide 5G coverage for free for 30 days. Just download the Try Us app. US Cellular, built for us. Terms apply. Visit uscellular.com/try us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, as you can tell, there's been a lot of experimentation going on, trying to do stuff without messing up what I've got here. You know what I mean? This, you fine folks, this is my bread and butter here. But the issue arises with, number one, more YouTube content is important. Number two, as you may have heard, somebody called in and was like, hey, just so you know, Spotify now allows video. And sure enough, my hosting company is like, hey, if you want, just upload the video here. We'll send out the audio to your podcast places. We'll send the video over to Spotify. Done deal. And it's like, man, that sounds awfully convenient. The problem is the podcast is not as good when I'm doing just video. So what I thought is I'll just continue doing the audio podcast like I've always done. If I have some time, I'll do some little short clips on YouTube about some of the topics that I covered, and that'll be that. The problem is now I'm leaving out the video for Spotify. Now, maybe there's a way to just directly go on Spotify only, and if there is, I will pursue that. That way, if anybody's annoyed by it, they can just not use Spotify or what. I don't know. But I took a little poll on social media and just basically asked, like, would it be too much if there were like shorts? In other words, I do a video that's just like a segment that I did. So you get the full length one that's audio, or there's some video segment. And right now, the majority of people are saying, nah, it's too much. Just do the normal stuff. So, as for right now, and I've talked to Clayton about it too, and he's like, yeah, it's cool and all, but I don't know about all that video on Spotify thing. I'm struggling to find a path to get there right now. So, sorry that I've been kind of all over the place. I've been trying different things and trying to make things work, and some good, some bad. But at the end of the day, like I said, this is my jam, and I don't want to mess this up. So this is where we start, and then we build from here if we build at all. Anyways, got the administrative stuff out of the way. So we spent a good amount of time going over contracts and whatnot. I feel a little bit more comfortable, at least with where I'm at. Hopefully some of you found that to be entertaining, educational, whatever. I want to turn our attention, at least to start things off here, to the wide receivers a little bit. There's a couple different thoughts that came up. Number one is, we've talked a lot about our thoughts on wide receivers and just kind of like, well, I kind of like Wicks, I kind of like Reed, whatever. And I thought, well, why don't we look at what's being projected? And one thing that I never really bring into this, because usually it doesn't have any interest to me, is fantasy football. But I felt like in this situation, it's actually kind of useful. Not that they know anything, but fantasy football is a massive industry. And it's not, I'm sure there's a lot of idiots, but it's really not just a bunch of stupid people flailing around that don't know what they're doing. It is a massive money-making industry. And so the ability to kind of project out, like to the yard, how many yards, touchdowns, whatever people are going to be getting is kind of an important thing, because people will pay good amounts of money for people that are good at projections so that they can get their fantasy football teams right. And some of these football team, these leagues, you're paying money. And that might be $10, it might be $100, it might be $1,000, some of these are serious money, so they take it very seriously. So anyways, all that is sort of the backdrop to say, I'm just curious what the fantasy football community is saying about the Green Bay Packers as far as what they're projecting. Now, this doesn't mean that they know, but I still find it interesting. So I went through just a couple different random sites, And I just wanted to kind of see what the consensus was. And there isn't a universal consensus, but there are some patterns that start to emerge. So I just grabbed a couple of these guys. I'm very sorry if you're a fantasy football person and I didn't grab your favorite site. I apologize. So why don't we start with ESPN? They have Jayden Reed with the most receptions at 62, Christian Watson with the most yards at 837, and Reed and Watson tied for touchdowns with 8. So you can debate kind of like who's the number one guy. If you go based on receptions, it's Reed. If you go based on yards, it's Watson. But Reed and Watson are the number 1 and the number 2. Behind that, they have Dobbs, 55 receptions, 682 yards, 5 touchdowns. Then Wicks, 427 and 3 touchdowns. Melton at 114 and a touchdown. And then Toure and Heath, no touchdowns and under 100 yards. Over at NFL.com, as far as the fantasy points are concerned, and it's only important because the top 3 are actually really close, but in fantasy points, it's Reed, then Watson, then Dobbs. So again, those are your top 3. Reed and Watson are your top 2. Reed, in this case, would be number 1. But if you look at receptions, it's actually Dobbs, then Reed, then Watson. In yards, it's Reed, then Dobbs, then Watson. And then touchdowns, it's 655 with Watson in the lead. So a lot of these places do have Christian Watson leading in touchdowns. And then also because his yards per reception is so high, you'll see relatively high yards compared to some lower reception numbers, which is the same case with NFL.com. So 886 for Reed, 777 for Dobbs, 774 for Watson as far as yards. After that, they got Wicks with 51 receptions, 659 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Even that is really close. He has almost the same number of receptions as Christian Watson. About 100 less yards and 1 less touchdown than Dobbs and Reed. So it's really like a close top 4. Then there's a big drop-off with Heath, 9 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown, and they do not add Melton and Samori Toure to the list. Over at Rotoballer, they have they actually really like Jayden Reed a lot and really do not like Christian Watson. If I had to guess, they kind of have a blind calculation going on because it's almost a copy and paste for Watson's numbers for last year, which would mean they're projecting him to get injured again. Again, I don't know if they actually projected that or if they just have a robot doing their calculations. But anyways, Jayden Reed, they have 64 receptions, 912 yards, and 10 touchdowns. For Romeo Dobbs would be the number 2, 59, 674, and 8 touchdowns. They have Wicks as the number 3, 39 receptions, 596 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then Watson, 28 receptions, 433 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Again, that's almost copy and paste from last year, so the only way he gets those numbers is if he's hurt for the same amount of time again. At CBS, they just have the top 4 again. They have Watson actually leading in receptions with 58. They have Dobbs leading in yards, but all 3 of the top 3 are right next to each other. Dobbs, 739, Reed, 733, Watson, 730. Touchdowns, they have Reed leading with 10, then Watson, then Dobbs with both having 8. Wicks, they have 38 receptions, 579 yards, 6 touchdowns, which again, there's a clear divide between the top 3 and Wicks, but that's still like right there. He's very close to the others. The final 2, Draft Shark, they have, this is in fractions too, so the numbers might be a little obnoxious, but Reed leaves with, or decimals, with 66 receptions. He also leads with yards, 837, but Watson has the most touchdowns with 6. Watson, 55.5 receptions, 816 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Then it's Wicks actually ahead of Dobbs, 49.5 receptions, 652 yards, a little over 4 touchdowns. Then it's Dobbs, 38 receptions, 442 yards, and 3.5 touchdowns. After that, they have Melton, the next highest. They actually have him at 15 receptions, almost 200 yards, and a little over 1 touchdown. And then Heath and Toure, they have below 100 yards and 0.51 touchdowns they have him at. Finally, Fantasy Pros has Reed leading in receptions with 64. Then it's Dobbs, 59. Then it's a pretty big drop-off, 39 for Wicks. Watson, 28. Again, probably the injury speculation stuff. Yards, You've got Reed again in the lead, 793, then Dobbs 674, then Wicks 581, then Watson 422. Touchdowns, you have a tie between Reed and Dobbs at 8, then Watson 5 and Wicks 4. So again, as far as the patterns are concerned, I think there's a clear winner as far as who would be the top receiver if you were to just go based on what we've done so far, and that's Reed. Reed is probably the consensus number one across all of these. He's maybe number 2 in a couple of these. He's never been outside of that. After that, aside from the 2 websites that probably had injury concerns or mixed in with their math, Watson's probably number 2. There's a little bit of a debate after that, but it's probably Dobbs, then Wicks. Then I would probably say Melton. You did have NFL.com had Heath and didn't mention Melton, but Fantasy Pros has Melton at 218 yards and a touchdown. Draft Shark, 15 receptions, 200 yards and a touchdown. ESPN, 10 receptions, 114 yards and a touchdown. If we average out all of these, you have, as far as receptions, Jayden Reed is number 1 with 62.5, followed by Dobbs at 55, Watson at 47, Wicks at 42, Bo Melton at 14, then Heath at 8, and Toure at 7.5. Yards, Jayden Reed, number 1, 820. That's followed by Watson at 669, Dobbs 664, Wicks 582, Melton 175, Heath 89, Toure 81. Touchdowns, again, Jayden Reed, 7.8 touchdowns, so call it 8. After that, you have Watson with 6.3, Dobbs with 6.28, so almost exactly the same. Wicks with 4.1, Melton with 1, Heath at 0.6, Toure at 0.17. So that would be Reed. And then Watson and Dobbs are almost like identical. Again, some of those were skewed for Watson, so you probably just throw him in number 2. But you've got Dobbs leading in receptions. You have Watson leading by 4 in yards, but tied for touchdowns. You got Wicks is the clear number 4, but not super far behind, 582 compared to 665 in yards. 4 touchdowns compared to 6 touchdowns. Then you have a gap where you have Bo Melton is kind of an thing, and then Heath and Toure are just sort of, we're going to throw a couple digits in there just in case he doesn't get cut, but probably going to just not play or even be on the team. Now, final thing to look at on this little experiment is how does that compare to what they did last year? Because, it's nice and all, but who's projected to do better and who's projected to do worse? So Romeo Dobbs had 69 receptions. He was our top most receptions, most touchdowns, everything. 69 receptions, 908 yards, 9 touchdowns. All of those went down, and drastically. From 69 receptions down to 55, from 908 yards down to 665, and from 9 touchdowns down to 6. Jayden Reed had an incredible rookie season. He was our number 2 receiver in terms of yards and touchdowns and receptions. He had 68 receptions. He's projected to get 63, so roughly the same. A little bit less, perhaps. 829 yards. They have him at 820. 8 touchdowns is 8 touchdowns. So they've got Jayden Reed staying Jayden Reed, which I suppose makes sense. It's hard to, you could look at that and say, well, he's a rookie, he's obviously going to be better. Not necessarily. I would say we're pretty much at a tipping point where it's as likely there's a slight regression as there is an improvement, especially when you look at all the talent around him that's sniping, opportunities away. You got Christian Watson, presumably, is going to be playing more. Wicks, who was kind of an unknown commodity, is now a known commodity and is probably going to have a larger role. The tight ends are going to be back. You got a bunch of running backs that we're hearing a ton about being used in the receiving role and all that stuff. So I understand it. Wicks, 41 receptions. They have him at 42. 605 yards, 582. 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. Roughly the same. So they don't necessarily see an improvement, or I should say a larger, more expanded role for Dontavian Wicks. Christian Watson, 30 receptions, becomes 47. 442 yards, becomes 669. 5 touchdowns, becomes 6 touchdowns. So you can more or less see essentially what they're doing. They're kind of keeping everybody mostly the same, but saying Christian Watson's coming back, who is he going to snipe from? And the answer that they're saying is Romeo Doubs, which kind of says a lot, because I think if you didn't know anything and you just kind of came into this blind, and I do think that's the biggest takeaway here. If you came into this blind, you look at it and say, okay, so Christian Watson is supposedly some big shot receiver, and this is what they think he's going to do, so he's maybe their number 2. Who is he going to be sniping from? You would just take it from the bottom guy. Just take it from Wicks. Take it from Melton. Just take his, how much did he gain in yards? 200 yards? So drop Wicks down to like 400 and something. You can pull a couple from a few other guys, but I mean, that's the guy that's not going to be on the field is Wicks, right? According to just about everybody, no, he's going to be taking from Romeo Doubs. Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks are not going anywhere. And I don't necessarily disagree. And again, that's not to discount Romeo. He still is projected as, maybe the number 3 in terms of usage, in terms of production and whatever. And maybe there is a little bit more even distribution being taken from Doubs, Reed, Wicks, Melton, as opposed to, most of it just coming off of Bo Melton and Romeo Doubs. But that does feel right to me. Now, that may not actually be correct. Remember, if I had to guess who Jordan Love's top guy is in terms of the guy that he feels the most comfortable with, the guy that he spent the most time with, the guy that he's done the most work with, it's Romeo Doubs. That doesn't mean nothing. Yes, what I said makes sense. Just think it out. So, anyways, why don't we take a break? I want to come back and real quick look at something that was brought to my attention on Patreon by Mr. Numberman. He was listening to me talk about wide receivers and number 1 and all that, and really just kind of leaned into, this is foolishness talking about yards and receptions and touchdowns. We should be looking on, per route type of metrics. And to be fair, I wasn't saying that Romeo Doubs is the number 1. I was just trying to come up with all the different definitions you could possibly come up with. And if you wanted to use that one, it would be Romeo Doubs. But generally, I agree. So I want to look at a couple of his comments. I have mostly just one disagreement with him on it, but I want to go through the stats anyways because it's interesting. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Ryan Bauer and Lauren G. Thank you both so much for your support on Patreon. I really appreciate that. I do forget to check once in a while, so I'm sorry if somebody else joined in recently and I just forgot. It used to be like a regular thing, like thank you to this person for joining. It was like a daily thing, but she's dwindling a little bit, which I just blame on the economy. I couldn't bear it to assume it was my fault, so I'm just going to blame the economy. But thank you guys both so much for your support. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. You ever hear of test driving a phone network? Well, US Cellular is letting you test drive their nationwide 5G for free. Try out US Cellular wherever you have spotty service, your commute to work, that one spot in your house where your service dips. It's as easy as doing a little beep boop pop boop pop with your phone. That's the buttons. That's the noise they make. Anyways, test drive US Cellular's nationwide 5G coverage for free for 30 days. Just download the Try Us app. US Cellular, built for us. Terms apply. Visit uscellular.com/tryus. My son started collecting football cards. I had no idea what the heck I was doing, so I went out and bought him one of those binders you put all the cards in and all that kind of stuff. Turns out, card collecting has come a long way since when I was a kid, and that's what people did. Now, there is a new way to buy, sell, and trade cards. It's called Arena Club. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the all-in-one trading card platform that you have to sign up for. Over at arenaclub.com/packdaddy. We actually did a whole YouTube video about this. I would encourage you to check it out. It is a fantastic website. You can, as I said, you can buy, trade, sell, but also you can display all of your cards right there on the platform. It gives you all of the grading. They'll even grade your cards. Their grading combines AI as well as human grading to get the most accurate grading of all your cards. And right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase by going to arenaclub.com/packdaddy. That's arenaclub.com/packdaddy for 10% off your first purchase. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
All right, so here's what Todd says. And Todd speaks my language, which is I care about the numbers and not anybody's feelings. I'm going to be as blunt as I possibly can. He starts off, Dobbs is Packers wide receiver 5. Wicks, Reed, Watson, Melton, Dobbs. Dobbs' rate stats are not very good, commonly the worst of these 5. Dobbs received the most targets, yards, receptions, etc. because he was healthy and not a completely raw rookie the first 6 games of the season. It's entirely true, and I feel like I've put that asterisk on there 1,000 times as far as, we didn't know we had in Wicks, and, we lost Christian Watson, and Bo Melton didn't arrive until week 13 or whatever, He says, Wicks is the best on this team, not much doubt, except that Watson's ceiling is insane. You got to do a real deep dive into Dobbs. He is the furthest thing from our number one. It's total yards and total receptions that are confusing this. Dobbs is wide receiver 5. Worst catch percentage, worst drop percentage, worst separation, worst of qualifiers for every EPA rate stat. It goes on and on. Dobbs was only number 1 because he was healthy and not a clueless rookie for 8 games. Passer rating when targeted, he was 4th. Yards per reception, yards per target, 5th. Success percentage, 5th. Yards after the catch per reception, 5th. Says actually he was 3rd in EPA stats, but half of Reed and Wicks. Melton didn't qualify. Ahead of Watson, obviously hurt all year, and light years higher ceiling. PFF grade, 5th. I don't pay for any sites, so these are just the advanced stuff I could easily find that are far more worthy than yards and total receptions. So I do want to go through some of this. Let's just freaking stat dump this thing and look at these different stats. The only one thing that I do want to point out is my high level of skepticism for Bo Melton. Bo Melton's PFF grade was high, mostly because of, his sample size is so small. The positive is he really only played about 4 games, and his grades were like 70, 80, 90, 80. And it was so stupid, but it's 4 games. His yards per reception is 2.68, which is really high. But he only had 2.68 or higher in 3 games. A lot of guys have ridiculous yards per route run in a game or 2, but over the course of a season, it kind of averages out with some of the lower ones, and you get a average. We don't have an average for Bo Melton. We just have highs. He played a little bit of time. He freaking blew up, and there you go. Right? So here is all of Bo Melton. Week 12, he ran 1 route. He got basically a 60 grade because that's what you get. Then we saw him week 15. That was the second time we saw Bo Melton. He ran 14 routes. It was 2 targets, 1 reception, 7 yards, 68.8 PFF grade. Week 16, Carolina, 15 passing plays, 14 routes, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 44 yards, 79 PFF grade. Week 17, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown, 17.5 yards per reception, and a 89.5 PFF grade, 89.9 receiving grade. Stupid, right? Especially for a guy that just came out of nowhere. Week 18 against Chicago, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 62 yards, 77.7 receiving grade, overall grade. Then his grade started to dip, but he didn't really play very much. In the wild card game, 2 targets, 1 reception, 7 yards, 55 grade, but he only ran 7 routes. Against San Francisco, he was out there for 10 passing plays, ran 7 routes, had 1 target, 1 reception, 19 yards, and a touchdown, which is pretty freaking impressive for running 7 routes, but still, for whatever reason, had a 59 grade, 66 receiving grade. So I'm not even necessarily disagreeing on Bo Melton. I'm very skeptical on Bo Melton because the numbers are so astronomically high. He was a 7th round pick for a reason. He was let go for a reason. I understand there can be reasons why people miss things, but I mean, they would have to have missed a lot of things a lot of times. Again, falling to the 7th round means the teams missed him numerous times over and over and over and over again. And then the Seahawks missed him when they cut him. And then the Packers missed him when they didn't play him all year. And by the way, as soon as Christian Watson came back, Bo Melton went right back to the bench. So the Packers missed it again, apparently. And are probably going to miss it next year when Bo Melton's going to be sitting on the bench because Christian Watson is the speed guy, not Bo Melton. So I don't know. But all right, let's go through it. Yards per reception. You got Wicks, then Watson, then Bo Melton, then Romeo Doubs, then Jayden Reed. PFF grades. Bo Melton, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Jayden Reed, Christian Watson. In fact, let me just do this. Bo Melton's officially off our list because whatever. Receiving grades. Wicks, Reed, Doubs, Watson. Yards after the catch per reception. Reed, Wicks, Watson, then Doubs. Yards per route run. Reed, Wicks, Doubs, Watson. Drop percentage going lowest to highest. Reed, Wicks, Doubs, Watson. Contested catches. Doubs, Wicks, Watson, Reed. Passer rating. Wicks, Reed, Doubs, Watson. Looking at man versus zone. I'm not going to go through every single stat. We'll just do the PFF grades to get a general view of it. In man coverage, Watson, Reed, Wicks, Doubs. In zone coverage, Wicks, Doubs, Reed, Watson. Can really see the difference there. Let's kick over to SIS real quick. On target catch rate. So it's a good pass. Did you catch it? Reed, Wicks, Doubs, Watson. First down percentage. Wicks, Watson, Doubs, Reed. Broken plus missed tackles per reception. Wicks, Reed, Watson, Doubs. Points earned per route. Reed, Wicks, Watson, Doubs. Points above average per route. Reed, Wicks, Watson, Doubs. EPA per target. Wicks, Reed, Doubs, Watson. Positive play percentage. Wicks, Doubs, Reed, Watson. Points above replacement. Reed, Wicks, Watson, Doubs. Boom percentage. So big plays. Wicks, Reed, Watson, Doubs. Bust percentage from, least suck to sucky. Wicks, Doubs, Reed, Watson. So I would say, reading that, Doubs is sort of the clear number 3. I would say Watson fell under Doubs most of the time. Wicks would be number 1, then Reed, then Doubs, then Watson. The only real question would become, does the injury play a bigger part in that? Because remember, Christian Watson came in late. He was injured to start the season, didn't play. Plays like garbage is a little unfair, but not Christian Watson-y for 5, 6, 7 games. Then he breaks out, gets immediately injured. Here's the way that I would look at that. Let's go back to 2 years ago, 2022. On target catch percentage, it'll either be Watson or Doubs wins the category. Watson, believe it or not. Drop percentage, Watson. Yards per route run, Watson. Yards per target, Watson. Yards per route, per reception, Watson. Yards per game, Watson. First down percentage, Watson. Broken plus missed tackle percentage, Watson by a metric friggin' mile, if that's even a thing. Let's see. Points earned per route would be Watson. Points above average per route, Watson. EPA per target is Watson. Positive play percentage is Watson. Points above replacement is Watson. Boom percentage is Watson. Bust percentage is Watson. He won every single category. Now, maybe Watson was just kind of a fluke in that first year, because it's not exactly as though Doubs got significantly better from year 1 to year 2, because I don't think he did. It's that Christian Watson didn't replicate what he did in the first year. So either year 1 was fake and year 2, when he was injured the whole year, was real, or Christian Watson's probably better than Doubs. So it really just comes down to a couple questions. I think if you look through that again, you would probably say that Wicks comes out in front, I believe. I don't remember a lot of the PFF stuff necessarily. Wicks and Reed are 1 and 2. You have to answer a question about Bo Melton and whether you believe what he did in a very short period of time. I mean, he was a full-timer for 2 games. He was a part-timer in 2 to 3 other games. That's it. And I don't even know if he was a full-timer in any of those games, to be honest. He didn't have 40, 50 routes or anything like that. Then you'd have to answer the question about Christian Watson. Do you think that 2023 was an anomaly based on injury, and that given a full season, we would see much more of the really good games like we saw before? Still have some not good games, but it would still be more of those positive games so that he would end up ahead of Romeo Doubs. If so, you're probably looking at Wicks, Reed, Watson, Doubs, depending on your answer of Bo Melton. If you're not high on Watson, then it's probably Wicks, Reed, Doubs, Watson, again, pending your Bo decision. I don't think Bo is a big factor for this team, depending on Christian Watson's injury situation. Of course, I know everybody listening is thinking, well, I mean, get 2 super fast guys out there can't be a bad thing, right? I get it. I know it sounds cool. I just don't. I mean, we saw it. We saw what happened. We saw a guy absolutely tear everything up, and as soon as Christian Watson came back, they're like, all right, get off the field. And it's not just Watson necessarily, but if you have Wicks and Reed and Doubs and Watson, when does Bo get on the field? He will, but is he going to get anywhere near equal opportunities with any of these guys? No. Depending on injury, no. So, anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. You guys have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.